Shalom and welcome to the Parsha in 60 seconds. Today's portion is from Numbers 13:1 through 15:41. It's called Shalach, which means send. So God tells Moses to send one of each of the 12 tribes of Israel to scout the land of Canaan. Among the scouts were Caleb and Joshua. They enter the land and cut down a branch with a huge cluster of grapes as well as some pomegranate and figs. They report to Moses that the land is very good. 10 of the spies claim that there are giants in the land, while Joshua and Caleb agree that it's not a big deal. The people freak out and try to stone the leaders, when all of a sudden God shows up and complains about the people to Moses. God threatens to strike them with pestilence, but instead God pardons them and commands them to wander for 40 years. After being commanded to go back into the wilderness, a small group decide to take the land without God. They fail. God tells Moses how to do flour and oil sacrifice and how to make offerings for accidental sin. A man violates Shabbat by gathering sticks and is put to death. God tells Moses to use string as a reminder to keep the law. Today, the string is known as tzitzit. And that is Shalach in 60 seconds. Shalom and welcome to the Parsha in 60 seconds. Today's portion is from Numbers 13:1 through 15:41. It's called Shalach, which means send. So God tells Moses to send one of each of the 12 tribes of Israel to scout the land of Canaan. Among the scouts were Caleb and Joshua. They enter the land and cut down a branch with a huge cluster of grapes as well as some pomegranate and figs. They report to Moses that the land is very good. 10 of the spies claim that there are giants in the land, while Joshua and Caleb agree that it's not a big deal. The people freak out and try to stone the leaders, when all of a sudden God shows. Today's portion is from Numbers 13:1 through 15:41. It's called Shalach, which means send. So God tells Moses to send one of each of the 12 tribes of Israel to scout the land of Canaan. Among the scouts were Caleb and Joshua. They enter the land and cut down a branch with a huge cluster of grapes as well as some pomegranate and figs. They report to Moses that the land is very good. 10 of the spies claim that there are giants in the land, while Joshua and Caleb agree that it's not a big deal. The people freak out and try to stone the leaders, when all of a sudden God shows. These portions from Numbers 13:1 through 15.
So, hello, everybody. You should be able to hear me now. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up or let me know. You are up and running. Great, George. Really nice to have all of you here today. Our Parsha, as I said, is Shalach, the story of the 12 spies. And I want to give you a question. This story is really about balance and our heart. Very faint. Okay. Let's see if I can.
You are up and running. Great, George.
Okay, is this any better? I've got my system turned up as loud as I can. Still faint. Okay. Let me see if there's something in Ustream I can adjust. Any better? How's that? Did I click it on now? We got something? Sound? Our other guests, for those of you who have just arrived, we're doing Parsha Shalach, which is Numbers 13:1 through, oh my goodness, that's not what I wanted to write, through 15-41. Okay, so everybody has sound now. That's great. Glad to hear that. I've got it cranked up now. Got it going the right direction. The key concept in this story about the 12 spies has to do with balance. It's often been said that we are our own worst enemy, which means that sometimes we sabotage ourselves. Can anyone give me any examples of how our spies sabotaged themselves? Any ideas? They had good things to say, but what about the negative stuff they had to say? Wait and see. Give you a minute here and see if you have any comments. Because the spies went in, they checked out the land, they were gone like 40 days, 40 nights, something around there. They came back and they made a report not only to Moses, but to the people as well. Now we know they said great positive things about the land, how it was good for growing, how it was filled with water, how the weather was fabulous, how the land was good for gardening. But what about some of the negative things? How might they have sabotaged? Right? You're correct, George. They gave a wrong report about the Canaanites. What were they saying about the Canaanites? Do you remember what they said? How about the size of the people? Remember how they were talking about how the people in the land were like giants and that they were too many? And Joshua and Caleb, you remember? Yep, Joshua and Caleb were the only two that did not give a negative report about the people. They continued to hold the good story and say, we can do this, we can do this. Just like you said up here, George, when you said Israel could have beaten them with God's help. That's true. We could have, but a disease was running through the people with the story of the spies. What were, they were caught, came back, and these people were muttering, and they were complaining about, let me get my other book here real quick, hold on a second. Sorry about that, that one was still down on the floor where I needed it. And they complained about the people. And let's see. They said the land flows with milk and honey, with the fruit. And then they started complaining that they were tall, they were military strong, as you said, George. They complained that they are powerful. They complained that the cities are large. They're very well fortified. The Anakites lived there. The Amalekites lived there. The Hittites, Jebusites, the Amorites, the Canaanites. And Caleb said what George said, that it's time to trust in God, because with God's help and God on our side, we will prevail. But the other spies said, we cannot prevail. We will surely be overcome because those people are stronger than we are. Now, when you got a group of people together, one of the things that is most contagious, besides diseases, besides physical contagion and so on, fear is contagious. And it can spread like wildfire through a crowd. That's what happened in this particular story. These negative folks came back with, well, we can't beat them. They're too strong. The cities are too fortified. Whine, whine, whine. We can't do this. We can't do that. Instead of focusing on what they could do and thinking about their strengths. That's correct, George. We see negativity here. And these other 10 spies were very negative. And the only cure that we have for when fear sweeps through a crowd, like it obviously has with these people, is courageous action. We have to jump up and take a stand. Now we can think about this in our own lives too, because not only were these people required to take a stand, which we know they did not do. Instead, they spent the next 40 years, they spent more time wandering in the desert, and we see those continued. But how do we combat this? What kind of courage do we need? How do we apply this to our own lives? What kind of situations have you folks been in, if anybody wishes to share, that required you to publicly take a stand and combat that fear that was running through a crowd? I'll give you a few minutes. Let's see what kind of comments and thoughts you have about this, because we have some lag time here. So let's give you a moment and think about this. Are we led by our hearts? Are we led by our minds? In this case, I would say they were being led with their heart, not with their mind. No, they were being led with their minds because they were thinking logically about, oh my gosh, they're stronger than we are, their cities are fortified, we don't have the weapons to do this, we can't possibly do that, we're not going to win, we're going to lose, we're going to die, yada, yada, yada. So they were thinking with their minds. They should have been thinking with their hearts. So what do you think? Because in their hearts they knew they could win, but they were letting it slide. And this is when that crowd mentality can take over and sweep a situation out of control. What about a street riot? Somebody starts something, and pretty soon, they lacked faith. And then today we can see that in situations like a street riot. Maybe one small group of people will start it, and before you know it, people in the street are all caught up in the situation, and they catch that groupthink mentality, and it all spreads through the group like wildfire, and pretty soon you got to call out riot control and the National Guard to bring it down and calm it. However, they didn't have the National Guard then to back them up in this situation. They didn't have the army to back them up. They had their simple weapons, and they were there. So fear can be a serious threat, not only to our physical well-being, but it can be a threat to our spiritual, our mental, and our emotional well-being. A group mentality, groupthink, is extremely contagious. And it can do a group in quicker than anything. Like we saw that in Animal Farm by George Orwell. All pigs were equal, but it turned out that some pigs were more equal than others in groupthink, and we see it often in the workplace. The workplace is a really good place for shalach to do a comparison, because sometimes you'll have a leader who will make a decision and it's not a good decision and a problem will erupt. And then you have the ones like the whistleblowers who are willing to take a stand and go against it, even if the result is the loss of a job or, the loss of something else, but they're willing to take down the big guys with their one small voice. So there's a lot of lessons for us to be taking from this particular reading of the 12 Spies. Any comments from anybody? Any questions? We have a diverse group of folks here. From coast to coast and from north to south, from our country and above the north of the border. So any kind of comments from personal experience that you'd like to share? Questions? I'll give you a second here. Allow a minute for you to get caught up. Okay. Well, let's move on then in the Parsha, and let's look at the next concept, the major concept. It's called the Talit. We wear a Talit. And the most important part of the Talit is, of course, the tzitzit strings. Let me see, find you that verse. Gauze fringes, here we go. Gift. Okay, it's in Numbers 15, and it's all the way to the end of the Parsha. Let's see. George has a comment for us. I have seen in the workplace where people try to do right and the group says nothing or takes the status quo to keep their jobs. That's exactly correct. It happens all the time. I was in one of those positions myself. And when I couldn't stand it anymore, I left and reported the director to the NAACP for discrimination and higher up the chain. And of course, she had some really ugly things to say about me, but I felt okay because I did the right thing. And we see it, like I said, a lot in the workplace. Because we tend to be more like the chicks following the rooster, and nobody wants to step out of line and take a stand. It doesn't seem to be in our nature generally to want to take a stand. It seems most of us are more inclined to just want to follow along and not stir up the dust, so to say. Unfortunately, in our parsha, they did not get to, quote, stir up the dust. They didn't get to go to war. They continued to wander for a while, which was really sad. It cost them. But then, by the end, we get to the part about the tzitzit. These are the little fringes on the end of the prayer shawl. And mystically, if you add up the numbers of knots and the twistings and the numbers of the strings and you take the cumulative value, it comes out to, supposed to be 613, which is the number of commandments that God was kind enough to give us as Jews to follow. And the reason that we have these on there is so that when we see them, we remember. And one mitzvah can often lead us to the next one because we get so excited about filling the first one. It's like, oh, I want to do another, I want to do another, and I want to do another. And this was said that it's so great a commandment because we were told in the Torah to look upon it and recall all God's commandments. Every single one of them. And in verse 39, it says to us, chapter 15, verse 39, that shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall all the commandments of the Lord and observe them so that you do not follow your heart and your eyes in your lustful urge. Thus ye shall be reminded to observe all my commandments, and to be holy to your God. Then we end, I am the Lord your God. I brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I, the Lord your God. Which is an odd phrasing of the sentence at the end because it's a restatement of who God is as a reminder. Be reminded of this because I am your God. I brought you out of Egypt. And that's the justification for you following the mitzvah and wearing tzitzit strings. Now, tzitzit was not given, according to the rabbis, it was not given to women. It was only given to the men. But many women choose to wear tzitzit. According to the Torah, it just says, speak to the Israelite people. And many liberal women, like myself, take that to mean, people, that's everybody, men, women, children, all of us that are adults, over the age of 13, though some young children wear them as well. And tzitzit are for all of us because God wants all of us to remember the commandments. Not just some of them, and not just some of our people. Now, according to the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, women are not obligated, but women can take them on and go ahead and wear them. Now, it used to be that we had robes in the ancient world that we would attach the tzitzit strings to at the bottom. And so they had two on the front of the garment and two on the back. Time changed, and during the persecutions in the Middle Ages, Jews would hide their tzitzit. Instead of attaching them to the bottom of their garment, they would put them on a small four-cornered cloth with an opening in the middle, what we call a talit katan today. And it's like an undershirt. You wear it underneath your clothes, and your tzitzit hang from the bottom of that. Traditionally observant Jewish men still wear the talit katan. And because our ancient fear of persecution is gone, many of them have their tzitzit hanging out. Then we also put them on prayer shawls today. Prayer shawls also date from the latter Middle Ages, when people stopped wearing robes per se, and then we would do the morning service, and so we'd wrap a shawl around and attach the tzitzit to the shawl. And oftentimes in shul, you'll see that when people recite the Shema and with prayers afterward, you'll see them gather up the four corners and they will hold them in their hand and they will kiss them when they recite the portion of that Shema. It's the third paragraph, and they will kiss the tzitzit and they will think about them when they recite the commandment that we are to wear them. Now, I was reading a commentary today that from a newly ordained rabbi who had been waiting and waiting, and he had a congregant come up to him and say, Rabbi, I have a halachic question for you. And the rabbi was like, oh, yes, yay, finally, my first halachic question. And he was hoping for something exciting, and this gentleman was talking about, I'm not as observant as I should be, and I drive to shul on Shabbos morning, and I know I shouldn't, but I do. Is it still okay for me to wear the tzitzit? Let's give you a poll here. What do you think the answer is to the question is? Yes, he should continue to wear the tzitzit, or no? Because that's what he's really asking. This gentleman's feeling guilty. He's putting on tzitzit, and he's feeling like he's a hypocrite for putting them on when he drives to shul on Shabbos morning. So let's see what kind of thoughts you have about this. Should he stop wearing the tzitzit every day on the talit katan? Should he continue wearing them? What would you advise him? We have our 60-second lag here, so and it's okay to answer. Just type in. Yes. Okay. George takes the yes vote. Alexson, am I pronouncing that correctly? Alexson takes a yes vote. How about Ariella and guest 302? You want to weigh in on this with a yes or a no? What do you think? What would you suggest? So far we have 2 yeses. Needless to say, our rabbi friend was very, very disappointed because he was expecting a major question of halacha law, like one of the big, weighty questions. He wasn't expecting this one. Having trouble hearing, okay. We got the volume here turned up all the way around, so let me type the question in. Should the rabbi tell the congregation Okay, how's that? I would think turn the car on and go back and forth is okay. Conservative position. Yes, George, that is the conservative position. because the conservative. Get a Shabbos going to drive you. There you go. Let's get a chauffeur, right? Just make sure it's not your car, because the act of turning on a car ignites a spark. And once it ignites the spark, it's like lighting a fire. Okay, Ariella 1 says, wear it. Yep, that is correct. Wear the zeet, because the job of the is to remind one of the mitzvot. And when you are reminded of them, you have a better chance of fulfilling them. And that's the point of it, because they remind you. It's a reminder. You're supposed to go, oh, that's right, there's something I'm not doing. Let me think, which one should I do now? And the teaching is that mitzvot are like rocks on the path, and you pick them up and hold them in your hands and try them on. If you aren't ready at that moment or that mitzvah, then toss it back on the path. Exactly. One does not cancel another. Don't avoid one mitzvah because you have failed to fulfill the other. That's correct, 302. Exactly. Sounds like maybe you might have read the same article. And then you toss it back on the path, try on another mitzvah, and as they grow on you, add them to your collection, and eventually you're following. Well, you can't follow all 613 of them today because approximately 1/3 of them are for temple service and temple worship. And since we do not have a temple at this moment, we can only really fulfill about 2/3 of the mitzvot. And there are many commentators, many of the rabbis, like Maimonides and a few of the others, Rashi, have created lists of what they feel are the most important mitzvah. So you can pull a list out and go through it, which is something I do with my B'nai Mitzvah students every year at the beginning of class when I start a new class. So because they're taking on the obligation of mitzvot at that age, what are they actually taking on? It's amazing how many of them don't know what they all are. So we pulled out that list and they go over it and we talk about it and then work on some of them through the year. Right, no, you should not feel shame for fulfilling a mitzvah. I think the gentleman in our story was feeling guilty because he was fulfilling one but not another. And so there are a variety of ways that we can do that. And it doesn't tell us not to fulfill one and not another. It just says follow them, and we need to pick them up, and we need to add them to the ones we fulfill on a basis. Many of us may not have grown up in Orthodox households where we grew up with this way of life. And so if we come to a more observant way of life later than in life and start adding mitzvah, we should be encouraged to add more. We should be encouraged that we can add faith as we add the mitzvah. when we teach our children, and this is important too, so when we teach, first we teach them to do. So it's the action first. After they are used to doing, then we teach the whys and wherefores. And I think the rabbi in this particular story I shared had the opportunity to go ahead and encourage the gentleman to do the action. And further on down the road, maybe the rabbi could offer a class on whys and wherefores and mitzvot. You know, what are they? What can we do about them? Maybe it would be a good class for OneShul. You know, maybe that's something that we could offer. And then we practice. I usually give my B'nai Mitzvah students one a month. And they try it on and they journal about their experience over the course of the month as to how it went for them. And then at the end of the month, they can decide to add it to their personal collection that they fulfill regularly, or they can decide to toss it back on the path because they're not yet ready for it. It's not that the mitzvah doesn't belong to you. It's not that it doesn't fit you. It just may not be the right moment for you to own it. And so later on, you can try it again and own it, because nobody should ever feel any kind of shame or any kind of negative emotions for fulfilling a mitzvah. So maybe the gentleman of our story wasn't able to express that. Maybe he grew up in a household where following mitzvot were laughed upon. It's like, no, we don't do those. Those are for our Orthodox brothers. They don't apply to us. We're liberal Jews, we're Reform Jews, we're conservative Jews, we're whatever we are. But we don't have to do those. So that's not for us. Somebody else will do that. But part of our being Jewish is taking on obligations. And we take on obligations such as mitzvot because they define who we are as individuals and as peoples, which ties back to our story about the 12 spies. They went into the land, they checked it all out, they came back, and they did a report. Out of the 12, only 2 were ready to go for it. The other 10 dragged the excitement of the people down and into the ground, and they stomped on it because they themselves were afraid. They didn't think that they could do the job. They didn't think it was theirs to own. It didn't belong to them. It was someone else's obligation. And as Jews, we don't think that. We think the obligation belongs to us. We stand up for what's right. We stand up and say, let's take a chance. And it's just part of what defines us, like I said, both as individuals and as a people. It's why you find so many Jews in lawyer work, because they're taking a stand to help others. You find so many Jews at the forefront of social service work, because they're out in the streets, as Abraham Joshua Heschel said, praying with their feet. Because it's all about action. It's not just about what comes out of our mouth. It's what do we do? And how do we get it done? So we tend to see a lot of Jews in these kinds of professions. Therapists, lawyers, social service work, volunteer work like Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, these kind of things, Red Cross, because we believe in being out in the front trenches. Now, it's 1:45, so I have to take a quick break here. and tell you that OneShul operates on donations and grants. And if you have enjoyed the Torah study this evening, forgive my lack of capital letters in English. I write in Hebrew at home, and there are no capital letters. So it's like, okay, fine. And so if you've enjoyed Torah study this evening and you believe that it's worth something to you for it to continue, then we ask for a donation, no matter how small. It all adds up. OneShul has a suggested donation of $5, but we welcome anything you have and want to give. Now, somewhere on this page, there should be a donate. There it is. There's the donate button. Donate button is up at the top of this page. Oh, well, thank you. I was out west for Mother's Day. My children sent me a ticket to fly out there to Washington and Oregon so that I could visit with my 4 kids out west and all my grandchildren. That's okay. Do not feel guilty if you have nothing to give at this time. But we always make our pledge, our donation spiel. Now, I don't know if Happy Face is... Oh, they do. There we go. There's a happy little face. But now, everything we've talked about, it was like the greatest Mother's Day gift I've ever had. I saw 4 of my kids that live out there. I went to Seattle. I went to Portland, Oregon. I went to Southern Oregon on both sides of the mountain. Saw all my grandchildren. It was awesome. I can't wait to go back, but that's not going to happen for a while. So maybe next year my children will bring me back out to visit with them. We'll see. But what about our topic this evening? Does anyone have any questions, any comments, any thoughts to share? What do you think? Let's see if there's anything anybody wants to share with us. So we'll see. I usually sing when I ask for donations. Put another nickel in that little pushka tin. Hit the donate, donate, donate button, please. Okay. No comment except great. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed this. Next week, we will be reading, in case you want to prepare some questions or comments or thoughts. Next week, it's Korach and his rebellion. As you know, Korach was a very naughty, naughty boy. He took that group think mentality and he whipped the people into a frenzy. And it cost him dearly in the end. And that's from Numbers 16, verse 1 through 18. verse 32. So next week is Korach, numbers 16:1 through 18:32. If you want to do a preview, check out. And we'll be talking about challenging. Our main topic will be challenging authority. How, why, and when. Yes, Chanah will be here next week, same time, same channel. So we'll see what happens. I've enjoyed studying Torah with all of you this evening. So hopefully I'll see all of you next week. Invite your friends to join us. And this is an open class of respect. So all comments, whether negative or positive, are welcome. Oh, let's spell that correctly. There we go. Then I'm going to go ahead and sign off if we don't have any other questions. Let's see. What do we have? Was there anything else in here? Yeah. Shalom. Laila Tov. Oh, there were two very famous quotes, and they cut from there a branch with one cluster of grapes and carried it on to a pole. Oh, it was a huge cluster of grapes, and that was numbers 13-23. And the other one, we were in our own eyes as grasshoppers. And that was numbers 13:33. Because they were doing the comparison, so that army was so big, they were so massive, we were like grasshoppers, and they were afraid they were going to get stomped. So I just want to share those quotes with you. A positive quote from the good land, and a negative quote that, oh man, they're so big that we can't possibly do that. Oh, look at that. That should read Numbers 13:33. Let's see, try that again. Oh, there we go. It doesn't, the cat face came from using the colon. Shift and colon gets us a cat face. Except there. Okay. Maybe not. Somehow I got a cat face. So, yeah. Anyway, I will let everybody go, and we will gather again next week. Spread the news. Would love to have you bring your friends and hang out with us for an hour. As once again, next week, same time, same channel, we get together and talk Torah. Shalom, v'laila tov, everyone.